Just as the Macintosh defied the status quo and showed how friendly and human a personal computer could be, the best Mac game developers in the 1980s and 90s showed how unique games could be when they aren't restricted by market trends and revenue targets. They made games that couldn't have existed without the Mac. The secret history of Mac gaming shares the stories behind these games of whimsy and wonder, creativity and charm, exploration and adventure. It'll tell the world about this forgotten but actually quite influential indie gaming scene which inspired new genres as well as a generation of designers, but which never got the credit it deserved. Every chapter casts a narrative around the people behind the games. So there are stories about how Apple sold Bandai down the river with the Pippin console, how Halo developers Bungie and Myst creators Cyan Worlds first rose to prominence, why Apple loved and loathed games, or how the best version of Tetris, a game called Supertris, was never supposed to come out. My name is Richard Moss. I'm a freelance journalist. You can find my work on Ars Technica, Polygon, Gizmag, Rock Paper Shotgun, and a whole lot of other places. I have Craig Fryer joining me as co-author. He was the first Mac Games evangelist back in '91, as well as the co-creator of the game Spectre, and he'll be bringing first-hand accounts to several chapters. I want to stress that this is not just a book about games. This is a book about how Mac gamers and game developers made do with what little they had, how they explored creative boundaries, how they sometimes imitated but seldom copied, and how community defined the space. There was a hidden magic to the Mac gaming scene in the 80s and 90s, and I want to bring that into the light. So please go to unbound.co.uk to pledge and make sure that the history of Mac gaming doesn't remain the video game industry's best kept secret. Thank you. My name's Richard Moss. In 2016, I asked for your help to put together an in-depth, human-centric history of Mac gaming, which had for too long been forgotten and overlooked, left as the butt of jokes when it should rightfully have been remembered as a former hub of innovation and cutting-edge game design. More than 1,300 people chipped in to help reveal the secret history of Mac gaming, and the book they made possible was published in March this year. Now I'm turning my attention to another overlooked but vital piece in the game's history puzzle, shareware games. As the bedroom coding era faded away and the games industry turned increasingly commercial, many independent creators found themselves squeezed out. But with shareware, a new business model by which a game or a portion of a game could be given away freely in the hopes of receiving a registration fee to unlock the rest. With shareware, they had a way to keep making stuff. Shareware was the savior of independent game development, the model by which indies survived. It brought radical new ideas and technologies crashing into the game space, overhauling the existing order so profoundly that the big companies fell over themselves trying and mostly failing to get a piece of that sweet shareware pie that the likes of id Software, Apogee, and Epic Mega Games had built their fortune on. In my new book, Shareware Heroes, Independent Game Development at the Dawn of the Internet, I want to do the same thing that I did for Mac gaming. With your help, I want to dig through old archives and interview the people who made the games that transformed the industry from the bottom up, to explore this incredible community of developers who believed they could find their audience not through advertising and computer stores, but via word of mouth and online repositories. Developers who had faith that the people who tried their games for free would be convinced to buy them. They might have just as readily imitated as innovated, but they did everything on their own terms, and I think it's time we heard their stories. Shareware Heroes is a book about shareware's massive impact on the games industry, and about how this novel business model kept indie game development alive. But most of all, it's a book about the people who made the shareware other people loved. So please, if you agree that it's about time we learn about the shareware heroes who kept indie gaming alive, make a pledge and help this book become a reality.
Hey everybody, it's Ron with Ron's Computer Videos. I want to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day and spending it here with us. We've got a great interview. Let's get right to it. He's an author, historian, documentary filmmaker, and Macintosh gaming aficionado, Richard Moss. Richard, how are you this evening?
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm fine, except for a bit of computer trouble just before. It's under control for now.
Well, I'm glad. I sometimes when software goes haywire, especially when you've invested so much time and trouble in kind of tweaking things, I get it. When things go bad, they go really bad.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking before we started recording. I don't know why it has to happen today, but my iMac decided it's not going to play nice, and I even had like this whole audio setup that I usually use that I've had to start from scratch, and it's not quite what I usually have. And I just didn't have time to make things the way I like it. Computer's running slow. I don't know what the deal is.
Well, I hope that you're able to get it sorted out. I've already got a support call in with Tim Cook. So hopefully he'll be calling you in the next 20, 30 minutes or something like that with a solution. But with all the technical problems, I do want to, again, thank you for taking time to be here. I know that with the time difference, it's evening here. It's mid-afternoon there. So it was kind of a big deal to make sure that we got this all correct. So thank you again. But let me go ahead and let's get started. Let me ask you, what inspired you? Well, actually, and I'll just say, I've got a wonderful copy of your book here, the Secret History of Mac Gaming. This is the expanded edition. As you can tell, it is a full 6 inches thicker than the original. Maybe not, but it is several extra chapters, several thousand pages, something more. I can't remember what the difference is, but it's I don't want to reveal anything at the end, but it turns out that that it was the monster's name. Wasn't Frankenstein at all. It's weird. So, but what inspired you to become an author?
It was weird. It was kind of an accident getting into writing books. Well, an accident as well as something I completely intended. But to explain, so at university, I did a double degree, studied Bachelor of Arts and Science, spent like the first 3 years trying to figure out what am I majoring in, just doing lots of different areas of study. Eventually decided I was going to do history and computer science, and then when I graduated, I wanted to do game design. But as it happens, I was finishing university when you had the global financial crisis, and the Australian games industry completely collapsed. It was an export-based industry. We did work for hire for big American companies, and suddenly the value of the Australian dollar versus the US dollar, it like hit parity suddenly after having been really cheap to hire Australian workers. And so lots of studios collapsed. There were just a few indies left, and I couldn't get work doing game development stuff. And so I was also at the same time doing writing as sort of an exercise, a creative exercise to understand games better, to think about what I like. And I really enjoyed doing the writing, and a website I'd been a member of for a while, used to be called MUSE, and it became Maxine. So emulators on the Mac, that went through its every few years reset from like database crashes and things, and they were starting fresh and asked, does anyone want to write news updates? And I put up my hand. Okay, I'll do it. I've been enjoying some writing. I'll write a few articles about old Mac games and whatever else catches my fancy. So I was doing that. About the same time, I discovered a website called Bitmob. Tagline was "Where the community meets the press." The idea is you've got a team of professional editors who work in the games media, and a community of people who are they're aspiring professionals, or they're just hobbyist bloggers, and they write stuff, and if it and the editors are reading it, and if it's really good, then the editor will give it a professional edit, and they'll put it on the front page, push it out to the wider bitmap audience that aren't specifically seeking out these blogs. And the first thing I put up on there was a brief history of Mac games that I'd first published at Maxine, and it within a day, it got pushed to the front page, got a whole lot of traffic, a glowing bit of feedback from the managing editor. And I was like, okay, yeah, this writing thing, maybe I should do more of this. And so I kept writing stuff at Bitmob, and at the same time doing news updates and things at Maxine. And come December 2020, Ars Technica, of all places, gave me my first paid freelance commission. I had responded to a call out for evergreen feature articles. And I was like, hey, maybe I could do something on adventure games. I pitched them. They liked it. They said, we'll give you $1,000 if you write a few thousand words. I submitted. They said, we want it to be longer. Can you double the length of this? We'll pay you some extra money. That got published, did really big numbers. Was great fun. And then I was just slowly picking up more freelance work and not being able to find a job, basically doing anything. I'm applying for different things. Difficult time in the job market, particularly if you're trying to get work as a writer and you're not qualified specifically as a writer.
Sure.
Weird way that things work. Sometimes if you don't have the correct piece of paper, it's hard to get in the door.
How do you get the job without the experience, and how do you get the experience without the job? It's the horse and cart. Absolutely.
Yeah, and whatever the cause, I was never able to get work. So I just eventually decided, well, I'm going to stop applying for jobs. I'm going to freelance full time. And after I'd been doing that a few years, I went back to university and did a master's in journalism. And I almost did a PhD in history focused on games. Decided in the end I don't want to be an academic. It's a bit too dry for me. And that is when I started working on what became The Secret History of Mac Gaming. It was what I chose for my big project. So we had a capstone subject where you do a large project. And I decided I'm going to do the first few chapters of a book on Mac games and a journalistic style, serious history, which was really useful because I got some fantastic guidance and editing support from a very experienced journalist who knows nothing about computer games whatsoever. And so it helped me make it accessible to a broad audience and then understand my blind spots as a writer much better and figure out how to communicate things for people who didn't like us grow up using Macs and super embedded in that world. So that was a really good experience and came out of that with a whole proposal that I took to Read Only Memory, actually, great publisher of video game books. And the guy there, Darren Wall, said, I am not in a position to take this on, but how about you try this other publisher, Unbound? And cut a long story short, I made a deal with Unbound. They recently went under and out of business. They were a crowdfunding publisher, sort of a hybrid. You have to raise the money up front, and then they do the traditional publishing thing. So they do design. Darren Wall actually ended up getting pulled in to be our designer. They do the design, all the printing stuff. They handle all the stuff a publisher would do, and then they put it out and you split the profits. And after a few years, maybe not even a few years, I don't remember how long it was, but after a while the book went out of print. I got the rights back. I made a deal with Bitmap Books to do an expanded edition, and we added, I think it's about 6,000 words of additional content. We revised the layout. We added a gameography at the back. We got a foreword from Graham Devine, co-creator of The Seventh Guest. He's such a lovely guy.
Oh yeah.
Icon gallery, two-page spread at the front and the back. That came from me. I wanted to do that on the first book, and we didn't have the budget. A few other extra little things and a whole lot of corrections. Anyone who had the first edition, there were some errors. I tried my best. I made a bunch of errors. I fixed as many of them as I fixed every error that I knew about for the expanded edition. and it's still available now, and
It is.
and getting a steady flow of sales, which is so great. When I was working on the book originally, people said Mac gaming. There's no Mac games. It's going to be like 5 pages long, and it'll just be about Myst and Marathon, and no one's going to buy it. And it's like, suckers, you're wrong.
Yeah,
I proved it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such a, when people think about Mac games, they do think about like kind of those, the big sellers and things like that. But it's there's such a rich history in this, which is why I really appreciate the book, because it does the deep dive into some more obscure titles, and of course covers the big things, but also gets into some of those old favorites too. But when you because you kind of covered on, or you kind of touched on that the focus was gaming, and it was because that was sort of something that you had decided to do as part of kind of with university and things like that, that was going to be your big project and things like that. But so I'm guessing growing up, this was not just something you stumbled on. This is, you are a dyed in the wool Macintosh gamer from back in the day.
Yeah, so I think the first computer game I ever played was Alternate Reality: The City on Macintosh Plus in like 1990 or 91, thereabouts. And I was watching Captain Planet on the TV, I think, something, or Banana Man or some cartoon. And my brother had this new game, and he put it on the Mac Plus, and I was just enraptured by it. I went over there, I stopped watching TV, and I was, what is this game? And I was completely enthralled to see it. And now that's a really deep and complex game. It's got weather systems and all this like insane stuff for a 1980s RPG. It was so far ahead of its time. It's also pretty crappy as a game, but it's an incredible world simulation. And so I grew up using Mac Plus, and then like we had a LC2 or something, like an early 90s desktop, and then we moved to one of the mid 90s performers. So I was using Macs all through the 90s and 2000s, playing games on there, almost always years behind. So I'm mostly playing like the classics, because we didn't have a powerful computer. Like I'm running System 7.5 when the world is on 8.6 or something like that. I didn't get to play anything that required System 7.6 or later until 2001 or 2002 when we got an eMac. So I was a ways behind. But I knew that classic era really well, because I grew up playing games on there, and from about 97 starting to pirate old things from online, because the family got the internet. So lots and lots of classic Mac gaming, and I was lucky in that I also got exposed to a lot of other stuff. I got exposed to a little bit of Amiga, a whole lot of DOS and Windows, and some game consoles. So I got a good broad perspective on games, and then as I became an adult, I noticed no one gives Mac games their due, but I can see that there's an influence here. I can see that some of these games affected what came after, and I know from just my interest in history that there's games that maybe aren't recognized as having been Mac games. Like Myst is HyperCard through and through. It how can you not think of it as a Mac game? But a whole lot of people do. And SimCity, it was released on Mac first. It was developed, like the first version was developed on Mac and ported to other platforms. So I wanted to right that wrong and show the world that Macs are a big deal.
Yes, absolutely. I think that they always kind of got, especially like there was a point where things kind of moved into that Wolf 3D, and Catacombs 3D and Duke Nukem and the FPS kind of era for things. And at that point, people were, because a lot of that stuff really wasn't on Mac, or if it was on Mac, it didn't really perform all that well. So it kind of like that, as things went into that world, it kind of felt like we got left behind for a little while. But for so long, we had things like Dark Castle, and we had amazing games like not to make another castle, but like Creepy Castle. That's my favorite Mac game. But we had all of those things, and people don't talk about it enough. But the Mac version of Prince of Persia, basically for Prince of Persia 2, it set what the graphics were going to look like. The Mac version looked so much better than every other platform that it set the standard for graphics on everything else for the sequel. And so it's like some of those things, those experiences, and sometimes like the refinement was on the Mac, but people just didn't have those machines and they just didn't think about it.
Yeah, often the definitive version of a game is the Mac version, because it got new graphics or higher res exports of the original graphics, and they'd put in all the patches that they've developed. Everything will get improved, so it'll be like the most stable version. It'll have quality of life improvements. It's got the standardized Mac interface, which is always just really helpful once you know how the Mac works. It's okay, everything works this way, instead of over on the PC side, everything had a different interface. It's very confusing.
Yes. Yeah. It was, everybody was just doing their own thing, and there was very little, like, there was nobody looking over the top saying like, kind of, yeah, let's try to keep it stay in the lane here, folks. But I don't know. I just think about games that came out that were just exclusive to the Mac, that from heavy hitters like Bungie, like the Marathon series, for like the first game definitely was strictly like a Mac affair.
Pathways into Darkness before that was
yes,
fantastic.
100%. That was the one I was going to bring up next. That's such a cool experience with you play in, and you've got to watch the clock the whole time. It's a complete resource management game, because if you get down there to the core, or the heart of this pyramid, and you don't have enough time to get back out, you're not getting the best entry. You're just you'll save the planet, but at the cost of your own existence, I guess. But the hours spent playing those things. That's why I especially appreciate all the time and trouble that went into this. But would you maybe talk a little bit about the process for collecting the research, and and not just necessarily about this book, but just kind of as you as a documentarian, as a filmmaker, how you go about the process of collecting your research for your projects, how you go about selecting people from the various communities to interview. Like, what's your workflow on that?
Yeah, okay. That's something that's taken years to figure out. When I was doing that first book, This Secret History of Mac Gaming, I didn't really have a workflow. I was a few years into my career as a professional writer and journalist when I started working on that book, and I spent like 3 or 4 years sort of working on it part-time. So it was haphazard at best process back then, where I'm just sort of following my instincts and my own personal knowledge and curiosities, and just going down different paths. And whenever there's someone I wanted to contact, just blindly stumbling around online trying to find them, maybe asking someone else, do you know how to contact this person? But I didn't really have any sense of how to do things. I just stumbled along in the dark and managed to get like 47 interviews or something like that. So it was a lot anyway for that book. But then between that and just continuing to grow as a freelance writer and working on other books and documentaries since, I have developed something of a process and workflow now. So the first thing that I'll do is I will just do this huge deep dive discovery period of research. So I'll go far and wide, cast a really broad net of what exists about this topic. So I've got something very specific that I know what I'm doing here, or maybe it's just it's a broad thing like shareware, like my book on shareware. I'm going to take a chapter from the Mac Gaming book that's called Shareware Heroes, and I'm going to broaden that into an entire look at the shareware scene with a focus on games. So what's that going to look like? And I just cast this really wide net and started learning about the shareware world, different platforms. So in the end, I didn't cover anything on like Palm PC and stuff like that, but I did some research to look at what's there. I started searching for every computer platform or every computing platform. What did shareware look like in the 1980s and 90s on here? Was there anything interesting that I can look at? How did this affect the broader shareware scene? Did it have an impact on the business of selling software? Because that sort of quickly became a theme that I noticed, that shareware had a big impact in how software was sold.
Yeah.
So that started to develop a focus there from just a really broad, let's see what there exists that's been written about this, and see what the interesting programs are that I could talk about. And I start reading deeper into different like sub areas of that, and from the ground up, I start building this understanding of what my book or documentary is going to be about. And as I'm doing all of that, I'm also thinking, well, what are the specific products that we're going to cover here? What are the games, or if it's something, it's usually games. Let's just say games. What are the games that we're going to cover here? What are the companies? Who are the people that are the like key people that will become the core of it? They may not be the emotional core, but they'll at least be like sort of a factual core, because they're really important to the story. They're going to be main characters. The emotional core I won't know for sure until I've actually done interviews and I've talked to people, because sometimes someone might seem important, but they're actually really boring to talk to, and they have no emotion, and they just state facts instead of talking about how things felt. And
Exactly.
And so you need that emotion, like in we'll get to it later, I'm sure. Terabytes, the documentary I worked on, Graham Devine, who I mentioned before, seventh guest co-creator, he's not that important to the history of horror in video games because he just worked on a couple of things. So he's really only key to one episode of this series, but he became part of the emotional core of the whole series because he gave such an emotive and really vulnerable interview. So you never know until you're actually doing the work what's going to become the emotional core.
Right.
But as I'm going along, I'm thinking, who are the key characters here, and who are sort of the periphery characters? Who are the people who are going to be interesting to talk to? And I'm assembling this long list of interviews. And then it depends on like the budget and the nature of the project for how many people from that long list can go into a short list. If it's a documentary, then there's going to be like a set number as a maximum cap. We cannot talk to more people than this because we don't have the budget. If it's a book, it's more about my time. How much time have I got to keep going after people? Because the next part of the process takes a long time, and that's finding people. Yeah. When you're doing history, finding people can be really, really hard. I feel like a private investigator sometimes, searching for people, like finding these breadcrumbs of, okay, so after they did the thing that I am looking for them for, what did they do after that? And then trying to find them from their work histories. If I'm lucky, then they'll just have a LinkedIn account or a website, and I'll be able to find them pretty quickly. There are like tools for finding email addresses from a LinkedIn profile that sometimes work for me and help me get that. Or they might have publicly posted their email address somewhere and I can find them, or they have a social media profile and I can just at them and say, hey, I want to talk to you.
Yes.
And that's always great. But then there are other people who they seem to have vanished. They're like, there's no traces of them anywhere. And so I'm looking forward, I'm looking backwards for any signs of them. I'm trying to find some hint. Maybe they've got a middle initial that they've put in their credits and I can use that to help me try and track them down. I can ask around people who might have known them. Do you know how to contact this person? Are you still in touch? And sometimes I just give up. It's not happening. And other times I eventually will crack it and I'll find them. And then as I'm looking for people, I'm probably also setting up interviews and maybe I'm conducting interviews. An interview gets a lot of research. I'm someone who's very thorough. So these days I will spend like a day doing research and writing this long list of questions that I want to ask someone. When it comes to the actual interview, that list is like guidelines. I'll go off script. Interviews is something you've got to feel. Sometimes you just go, "Oh, you are not suited to what I've planned for this interview. I need to change this on the fly."
Well, sometimes you have those things where it's like you go off in a more interesting direction than what you as a interviewer were even considering. I interviewed somebody from Apple recently that they basically, we started down one path, but then we ended up on a much more interesting side tangent and talked just about that for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to, if you're doing a good interview, you've got to just follow the curiosity that is sparked by whatever someone's saying and just look for the story. There's always stories there. You can talk about the craft of interviews for hours. There's so much complexity to doing them well, but it's really key to the kind of work that I do. Particularly things like The Secret History of Mac Gaming, which is an interview-led book. So it's narrated by me, but it's full of quotes, and in that case, it was the primary material for my research. I'm more thorough with my secondary research now, like finding sources. And it helps also that it's easier to find stuff because people have preserved more documents online since I started on that. But the interviews really shape what the story becomes in a project like that. That's kind of the gist of the workflow for getting everything together, and like the writing workflow is its own beast that takes a lot of work. It's all just processes upon processes, and gradually you get better at it over time, like anything else.
Certainly. It's been my experience that the toughest part of all of it is just tracking people down, because there are some people that are who I would consider luminaries in the gaming industry, or specifically like people that the people that were there is kind of how I term it. Just tracking some of those folks down, because everybody's getting older and not everybody maintains a social media presence, and a lot of these folks had a website in the mid 2000s, which is now defunct. Or, they might have a LinkedIn account or something like that, but they've never posted to it. It's just a business card out there. And so trying to turn all of these dead ends into an actual like working contact for this person, that's been my biggest challenge on some of these. And then there are some people, like I'll throw him out there, like Mike Sayas from Reactor. Another big, it's you're not going to find him because he does not want to be found. And so he would be a great person to talk to on, just to try to talk about the history of some of the projects he's worked on, and not just Mac Gaming, but as a comic book artist and things like that. But and
also stuff that's a bit like sort of semi-controversial, like my Playmate, like the
risque,
the quote-unquote porn games that right. Really pornography, but a titillation.
It's like the titillation titles for and those were Mac exclusive for a very long time. But just in my personal, I have some things like that in my collection that I'm not especially titillated by, but I think that they are important for the purposes of preservation, because I actually just earlier this year went through Japanese auction sites, because there were a lot of those titles that got released only in Japan, and you can now buy them for a few dollars. So I actually found a like a virtual Valerie screensaver that came out that was a partnership with Berkeley Systems. This is not archived anywhere except for my copy, which I'm eventually will get out in the usual places. It is simply just like a screensaver that just kind of like, it's a brick wall and there's a mouse and there's a cat, and the cat tries to hit the mouse with a mallet and it knocks out a puzzle piece, and it's the cover art of the game behind it. It's nothing. I mean, I wouldn't put it on my work machine, but it's something that exists that, hasn't been archived for, future nostalgia, as they're calling it now. But he's a controversial character for sure. Not to get too sidetracked on that. But as a documentarian, what type of pressure have you been under from members of the community? I know that there in anything like this, there are people that are thread counters that absolutely come after you for every little perceived wrong answer and things like that. You talked about that you had gone through and corrected as much as you could in the Secret History of Mac Gaming, but do you think that the community reaction was positive, or did you get a lot of people that were like, well, actually, those type of things?
I don't know if it's just because I'm very thorough and careful in my research, or something else, but I don't get many people being crazy and angry at me. How
good.
dare you to post this thing? You're so wrong. You don't know anything. I don't get that kind of stuff very often. I get really good response to all my projects. I've been blessed with that. They're all superbly reviewed. Like my books have 4 point something or other ratings on Goodreads, I think. Like the worst reviews I've had are usually people who are they're coming in with preconceived notions, and they're expecting something that it's not. Like I'll get someone reviewing The Secret History of Mac Gaming who was expecting a coffee table book that's full of just pictures, and they want like an encyclopedia. Like here's a list of games and a blurb about each game.
Right.
And I didn't do that book. I think that would be a cool book. I would buy that book. I would write it if someone threw a pot of money at me and said, we think there's a market for this. Sure, but that's not the book that I wanted to do. When I was working on it, I did a narrative history book. And so sometimes someone will come along and they will ignore all the material about what the book is, and they'll just buy it and they'll complain, this isn't what I wanted. Or there was a criticism for this book that I think is fair, but also quite harsh, that there wasn't enough coverage of the Japanese Mac game scene. And there wasn't much in there. I got as much in as I could. I did manage to talk to something blanking on his name, the Sim Tower creator, Yut Saito. And that was really cool, getting to ask him some questions. But I don't speak Japanese, and so there's this whole huge language barrier. It's quite hard to do research without understanding Japanese, and I didn't have the budget to hire someone to help me, which I would have loved to do. And I've been tinkering with a volume 2 on and off for years. And one of the things I'd love to do for that is to have more coverage of Japanese Mac games. But I don't know how far I'll be able to go into that, because it depends on budget, and I don't want to just be so shallow as to say, okay, this game exists, this game, they all existed, and here's a few words about them. I'd like to have some real interview material with at least a few of the creators. So at some point I'll have to make a decision there and ask for help or pay for help, whatever it takes to get some material. I also will get corrections from people, but they're usually pretty kind corrections. It's like, oh, you've got this, but actually there's more to it than that, or you've missed some nuance, or sorry to say, you got that fact wrong. you got the general gist of what's going on here, but you missed the fact. You put the wrong year. You mentioned the wrong person. In Shareware Heroes, I got two people with the same name mixed up. One of them was a former NASA space shuttle engineer, and the other was not. And I mixed them up in my writing. I sort of conflated the two people together, but they're two separate people who happen to work on video games at the same time.
Yeah,
that stuff can happen, and just own up to it and correct it where and when you can. That's all it can really do.
that's all you can do. And I think that this community it's not like, I know that there are some communities out there take themselves very, very seriously, and I don't know that the Mac community is maybe that way. I think people do have a little bit of sense of humor as always being a little bit of an underdog, where it was always that fight with your neighbor because they were wanting to show you some new whiz bang game or something like that, and you're like, hey, have you checked out Daleks? This is actually quite a bit of fun. You can click and there's sound samples. It's really neat. It's, and they're like, whatever, I'm blowing things up. But so I would sure hope that people in the Mac community would be kind and just be more like, hey, just as a correction, more than wanting to tear this whole thing down because it was just not written the exact way that they would have written it. But
actually, it just reminded me. Sorry to cut you off, but the biggest, most common complaint about the book is one that always makes me laugh. It's that the player is referred to as she in that book, and there's this whole story behind why that is, which is that, so when I was working with a journalism professor and was doing the early drafts of chapters, I had wanted to use the neutral pronoun they, third person neutral, but she's old school journalist. She didn't accept that. She's like, no, you have to use a gendered pronoun. So I started like swapping it around. Sometimes I'll use he, sometimes she, or I'll mix it up. But I'll try and be fair here. And I probably had maybe 60-70% she, slightly balanced that way because most of the people interviewed are men, and I thought it read better if we're like he, and then we talk about the player as she. Oh, okay, yeah. That's easy to follow the pronouns. Then when the book's finished, copy editor comes in. Copy editor wants consistency. Copy editors love consistency. It's like that that's what they care about the most. I don't know what they're like as people in the real world, but when it comes to books and articles, they always want you to use the consistent terminology. And so they went, it seems like you prefer she, so I've gone ahead and changed all the pronouns to she. And I went, okay. And away we went. The book came out, and maybe half a dozen people out of a few thousand either wrote in to complain or put in a review, like on Goodreads or something, to complain that the player is she and her. And I found this really, I being them, they found this really off-putting and jarring to read, because in their head they can't imagine a girl playing Mac games or something. I don't know, but I'm not going to get into that. But they would they get, some of them would get quite emotional about it. How dare you do this? And it's just a pronoun,
right? I know there's lots of people that can only see the world from their own vantage point, even though if you were to think about what the average American looks like, it's a woman. They're 51% of the population. So, it's sort of like, I'm not sure what the issue would be. Cause I read all kinds of different things. I just read a book recently where the protagonist is a young woman who's kind of going through this life-changing kind of event. And I can enjoy that media just as easy as I can reading. I was gonna say No Country for Old Men, but maybe not something that like depressing. But you can read things that are from told from a male perspective or whatever too. So I don't get all that. I'm just reading it as it's a part of it's escapism, right? That's the whole reason why you're doing all of this. So if you can't look at it from somebody else's point of view or something, you might be doing it wrong. I don't know. But, yeah. People need something to complain about, that's for sure. But talking about the book and talking about the writing process and going through it, you've got it all. You're now at the point where it's at the publisher, it's ready to go out the door. But way before that, as part of your research and as part of getting kind of in that creative mood for this, what games did you actually play to bring back kind of those memories and those feelings to help kind of inform you on the people that you absolutely had to interview, the people you had to talk to, the things you had to feature in the book?
Oh, that was like the most enjoyable part of the whole process. I got to play games and call it work.
Yes.
How awesome is that? And I don't even have to perform. Like if you're doing streaming, you've got to like perform and be switched on and inhabit some character. Like this is my streaming character. When you're playing it to collect B-roll for a documentary or to get screenshots for a book or just as background research for any historical project, you can just enjoy yourself. It's great. So I got to just set up a couple of emulators, get some old, like actual physical old Macs, and load them up with games.
Oh, yeah.
And I had the best time. And I do this on every project. I play as many of the games that we're covering as possible, even if I don't have to get footage or screenshots, because it helps me get my head in the world of this thing. And if you are if you're playing everything and you've got a decent bit of historical understanding of that era, then it can really help to give the context in your own mind of why something was or wasn't a big deal, how it would have felt to play it at the time. That's a really helpful thing to try to do, to try and get my head into a person from like 1985 who is playing Deja Vu, Nightmare Comes True, that's just come out, and it's this mind-blowing experience. Or they've just bought a new Macintosh and they're moving the mouse and they're drawing stuff in Mac Paint. And like there's a story in the book from Patrick Buckland, Crystal Quest creator, about his friends. Like the idea for the game came from, he had some friends over and they'd been drinking and they're drunkenly having the best time just using the eraser in Mac Paint, just removing things from a picture that's been drawn. And he thought, maybe I can make a game about cleaning up. And that was Crystal Quest.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And I can get my head into their heads by playing these old games while at the same time having lots of fun. And sometimes I'm playing a game that I've never actually played before. Like I hadn't played Continuum before I started working on the book. I hadn't heard about it as a kid. I wish I had. It's a brilliant game, but I didn't know about it. And then John Romero, of all people, mentioned it to me. Like, are you gonna include Continuum in the book? And I'm like, quickly type it in, search for Continuum, look at the game, download it, play it. This is such a brilliant game. Get excited. Laugh at the fact that it was sold as beerware.
Yeah.
And then start looking into the story behind it, track down the brothers, interview the brothers, hear the whole story behind it. It was great. It's one of my favorite stories in the book. And it came about because of like an offhanded comment from John Romero, who wasn't even a Mac guy back in the day, but because he's interested in history, he's like played lots of stuff. It's just the way it goes, and that actually is another part of the process, is just exploring. When I'm doing that research, or that broad net exploring, I'm also trying out games that I've never heard of before, because I haven't played everything. Pretty much nobody's been able to play everything as it's come out. So there's gaps in my knowledge, and I try and fill those gaps. And I'll search around and see what there is, and I will just randomly try things that without anybody recommending it. I'll just go, like, I'm browsing through Mac Garden, say, and I see something, and I'm like, hey, that looks interesting. I like the screenshot. I like the name of the game or something. I'm going to download that and spend 5 minutes playing it.
I'll do that a lot too. I'll go and it'll be like, I like this publisher. Let's see what else they made, and go through and just kind of like evaluate that list of things. And that's how I found some of my favorite Mac games, just by going through, and you'll find a developer, you'll find somebody that you like their style, and that becomes your new go-to. But as part of your very intense research that you did for the book, did you settle on a favorite Macintosh game?
I think my favorite Mac game is Glider Pro, and that
John Calhoun will love hearing that.
Yeah, and honestly, that goes back to my childhood. Glider and its various versions I grew up playing, and I loved them, and they're so wholesome and lovely, and
yes.
John calls it a quiet domesticity. Actually, he got that line from someone else, but he loves that line. That I think of them as the quintessential Mac games, yes. and they make me feel good to play them.
Yes,
and the house editor, the room editor in Glider 4 and Glider Pro is a delight to play with. And just click around, drawing stuff, making your map, and then going and playing it, downloading user-made houses. They're so imaginative and great. I adore those games, and I think Glider Pro is my favorite of the group, because it's like as much as it loses a little bit from being not just contained to the house, I like that it is unrestrained and is able to go to crazy fantasy lands, and then you go out the window and you're outside and you've got this sense of freedom, and then you go back in and you've got the safety and security is maybe not the right word when you've got like toast jumping up out of toasters and goldfish and stuff, but it feels calming getting back inside and having the walls closed in around you. And
it is that like game is like a warm hug, because it's absolute Macintosh comfort food to play those games, because so many people, like, I remember the first time I played Glider, it was at a friend's house. It was on a black and white Mac. It was very simple, but I was hooked. I was playing, and they're finally like, "Hey, it's kind of getting late. Do you want to take off?" And I was like, "Oh, I got to get a copy of this," and so got a copy in the usual places, but later purchased it, and it was one of my absolute. I think, like, when there was a point where I was liquidating a lot of old Mac stuff. It was one of the very last things I kept. and I never sold it. I gave it away because it was one of those things where it's like the right person just needs to have this at the end. And yeah, it's to hear John talk about the development and all of that. It's a real treat. He's such a nice guy, that's for sure. But you had mentioned earlier, you were talking about one of the chapters in the book is about shareware heroes. And so you've turned that into its own sort of independent volume, which obviously not paying by the character, but Shareware Heroes, the renegades who redefined gaming at the dawn of the internet. Just rolls off the tongue. Do you want to maybe give us a little bit of, do you want to give us a little bit of an idea of the kind of the expanded topic that you go into?
Yeah, so the way that book came about was after Mac Gaming, a little bit of time passed, and then Unbound came to me and said, hey, we'd love to do another book with you. What ideas do you have? I sent a bunch of ideas. They said, we like this one the most. And I had, as I alluded to earlier, begun with a pretty simple sentiment of, I'm going to take the chapter from Mac Gaming book and broaden it to the entirety of the shareware world. And that was pretty much as far as I'd thought about it. I'm like, I know there's interesting shareware stuff. And now, besides just talking about the little tiny indie shareware stuff on the Mac and Ambrosia and Freeverse and all those sort of mid-sized shareware companies, I can now talk about Apogee and Epic and id Software as well. That'll be cool. And so then I just did that broad research, that intensive research, and I found a story that I thought was really interesting about how this concept that you give away the software or the game free or a part thereof. You give it away, you say, do what you will with it, share it around with everyone. And all we ask is that if someone likes it, they send us some money. That's a really beautiful, elegant concept. Just if you like it, pay for it.
Yeah.
And I thought that's really interesting. And I could see pretty quickly that it was a precursor to in-app purchases, which are all the rage now in the mobile world. You get the app free, but then you unlock features, or you get in-app currencies so that you can buy little packs of virtual cards or something that will unlock more things. There's this whole toxic economy there, but that's a separate issue. The point is that shareware sort of led to the world we're in now, where everything is freemium. I've got this short essay at the end of the book about it. But in essence, we went from free with an asterisk of but you pay for it if you like it, to part of it is free and you pay for the rest.
Right.
To what we have now, which is free with the asterisk of but you have to sell your soul to us, and we will sell all your data and everything we know about you, and we will track you for the rest of your life. So, that version of free,
right?
Which is what you get on social media now, and on your search engine. Google tracks the hell out of everybody.
Yeah.
Even Apple tracks people now. They just don't sell your data to a third party. They use it for their own purposes.
Oh yeah.
Everything online seems to be free now, and it's all a sort of a descendant of shareware. And so I thought, well, let's tell the story from the beginning of shareware up until the early 2000s, when the term fell out of favor. And I believe from my research that it fell out of favor because it wasn't needed anymore, because it had become the de facto way of distributing things. Right. And that seems to have panned out that now it's quaint to want to charge money for something to a whole lot of people. They're used to getting it free, and so it's maybe a bit more business focused than I had imagined at the beginning. It's sort of this hybrid of a business journalism history thing and a design history, because I'm talking to the developers, finding out how they made their games, but also learning about the business model and how that evolved and how it affected people. And so the book is not looking as much at the little tiny nobodies who just did experimental stuff. It's more skewed towards the big players, but it still covers some of the weird, obscure stuff that is so delightful to discover.
Absolutely. It's the gig was up when companies figured out that there was more money to be made in making the player the product than making the game the product. And this segment is actually sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. It's no, stop, please, just let me play the game. It's there's a lot of those pay to win type of things and all that. And it's all very, very frustrating. I think it's kind of diluted a lot of the gaming industry, and it's very unfortunate. But no, as somebody as a kid who absolutely thrived on the shareware model, it's very sad to kind of see that go away. It was nice to have the first 3 levels of Commander Keen or something that you could play for free, or Jill of the Jungle, just to get a taste of whatever that was before you forked out $29.99, or whatever to get the full version. But yeah, it's kind of a sad lost thing.
And it's also a sad lost thing. The book itself is not available right now because the company Unbound, it turns out, was very badly mismanaged for a number of years, and they were trading insolvent. A lot of people believe now from data they've been able to gather, but whether they were or not, the fact is that they became insolvent and they have since gone out of business, and rights have reverted to me, and I'm still trying to get my book files so I can get a physical edition out again, and I'd love to do an expanded edition type thing that I did with Mac Gaming. I don't know whether I'd end up self-publishing that or take it somewhere, but I'd love to do something like that. But without the files, it doesn't seem like it's worth the hassle.
Oh gosh.
And so if I don't get the files at some point in, like, I don't know, the next 6 months or something, I may just edit the PDF and the EPUB files a little bit, make the corrections that have been sent in to me by people, remove Unbound from wherever they are mentioned in there, pop a new copyright statement on there or something, and just self-publish the ebook. So then at least people can buy the thing again without having to like message me, because I have a box of physical copies still. If anyone is in Australia and they want to buy it, send me a message. Or if you want to pay international shipping, which will cost a lot, send me a message. I have copies of both the paperback and the hardback still that I haven't gotten around to getting rid of.
That is probably it's worth investigating. If you have the means, get a copy while you can. So that's an excellent offer. Thank you, sir. But the now a book that I know that I can see on your shelf back there, the largest book you have produced so far in terms of raw acreage is A Tale of Two Halves: The History of Football Video Games. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about that and clear things up? Because again, a lot of the audience here is American, so they think about American football, or as they call it, football. They don't think about soccer. They don't think about rugby. They don't think about Australian rules football. But do you want to maybe talk to us a little bit? Set us straight. Let's make sure that we've all got our terminology correct.
Yeah. So this is football, as in association football, or soccer, as it is commonly shortened. What most of the world calls football. Just not our weird English-speaking countries that aren't England.
All the Commonwealth nations, yes.
Yeah. Here in Australia, football, depending on where you are, it means Australian rules football, which is typically shortened to footy here, which was very confusing while working on this because my publisher keeps calling it footy, and I'm like, but in my head, footy is exclusively the game that these really fit Aussie dudes play, where they're just running around for 2 hours constantly. Kicking and catching, and whenever they catch the ball, they get to go for a little walk before they go and kick it again, because this thing called a mark means you basically get a free kick. It's a weird sport, fun sport to watch though. And then up north, top of the country, everyone who loves rugby calls it football. So it's weird that we have all these different names for different sports that all converge into football. This book is about association football in all its guises, making it into video game form. So we've got like indoor football or futsal, outdoor stuff, beach soccer, all these different things. I've even got some games that are football themed. So like there's a Mario style platformer called Go Beckham Adventure Island or something. I forget the exact name, but it's a really weird title. And it's just really charming sort of Mario style platformer where you've got this little tiny character who carries a football around with him. And there's another platformer that predated that called Soccer Kid. It was quite popular.
I've seen that. That's like a TurboGrafx 16 game or something like that, right? It's because I
think
you're
and Amiga and Super
and
Nintendo. Yeah, and there's you kick, instead of jumping on enemies' heads in that game, you kick the ball at them, and that makes them go away. And you have to dribble the ball, and sometimes you'll use the ball to like hit a switch. And you can balance on the ball. They use the ball quite extensively, but then you can also lose the ball, and you have to like press and hold a button to make the ball materialize again next to you. It's a cool game, and I would love it if it weren't so excruciatingly hard and unfair. That was the era of excruciatingly hard and unfair games. 8-bit and 16-bit days.
Well, it's going to be a rental, so you can't beat it on one rental, or at least that's how it was in the US. So like Nintendo Hard was sort of that. This game was the equivalent of like $70 in, with inflation, and you could not go home and beat it in 20 minutes because mom and dad would be absolutely furious, and you would never get another one. So it had to be a little unfair. It had to be Ghosts and Goblins hard, so that way that you would just keep coming back and beating your head against the wall until you finally beat it, and then realize you had to play it all again.
Yeah, and most of the games in the book, of course, don't have that problem because they're just simulating a sport, and a sport is infinitely replayable. It turns out that there are a lot of soccer games that have been made. I went into this book thinking, maybe there'll be like 400 games that have been made in like the 30-40 year period from that I wanted to cover from like 1980 to 2010 was the core of the book, while acknowledging the stuff that came before 1980 and touching on the stuff that's come since. The reason why I'm not going to the game since so much is that there's not much to talk about. It's like, do you want to play FIFA or do you want to play Pro Evolution Soccer? Or do you want to play Football Manager? And that's almost the entire story of the past 15 years of games in this genre. There's not much else. So I just had a short section at the end for some interesting games. Let's just touch on some interesting games from the past 15 years. The meat of the book is 1980 to 2010. And it turns out that there weren't like 300, 400 games with a football theme released in that period. There were maybe a couple of thousand. If you include things that shareware and freeware and it was shocking to discover that and to do the research. And it's a big book. It's like
Yes.
it's over 600 pages. Yet we only cover about 400 games in the end. There's so much there, and most games, like most sports games, anyone who has played sports games, anyone who likes sports games would know most of them are terrible. It's it's actually really hard to make a good sports game. Doesn't matter whether you are trying to simulate the sport or not, whether you're just trying to make a fun game that happens to be themed after the sport. It doesn't matter. It's really hard to design a good sports game. And so I played several hundred games in the course of putting that book together, and I did research on a lot of them, try and get their background, get some history. I did about a dozen interviews with people who were notable figures in the genre, and I looked at how the genre evolved over time. Whether you've got management games, which started with a game appropriately called Football Manager, that is not at all related to what we know as Football Manager now. But there's this clear through line from the first Football Manager in 1982 to the current Football Manager now. It's the same type of game. Most of the flow of the play is the same. It's just way more sophisticated now, and I found that really interesting. Playing through the whole history and seeing how things evolved, where the core gameplay remains the same, but they just keep layering in more complexity and more authenticity. As not so much realism, because it's still a game. It's still abstracting away a whole lot of important stuff from reality, but it's feeling more realistic over time because it's becoming more authentic to the way the sport is perceived and understood. And a similar thing is happening with the action type games, where they start out, it's just a simple, like the first games were Pong. Literally, they were Pong, except maybe you have 2 paddles instead of 1,
Right.
and there's a little line that's been drawn, or a couple of sticks that have been drawn as the goal. You got to get the ball to go through the goal at the other end, instead of just getting it past your opponent. You want to get it through those 2 markers on the screen, and that's a goal. And then you started getting direct control, and you've got like 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 games where you're just sort of dribbling the ball around. There's a cool game on the Atari where players are locked in a triangle. You've got 3 players on your team, and 1, 2, 3 in an equilateral triangle, and they're tethered to each other for some reason. And you run around your 2 triangles against each other, and you're kicking the ball around trying to play this game, and they can't rotate or anything. So if the ball gets right to the edge, then only the player on that edge can get the ball.
Right.
And it worked pretty well, surprisingly. It was because it was accidentally understanding a fundamental thing about the world game, which is that it's about the movement of the ball. It's not about just get the ball and run it. The beauty of the game is that you have to move the ball around. You have to pass it between players, and when you've got a game where the opponent can run faster than you, and you're 3 guys tethered to each other, you have no choice but to keep passing the ball, keep trying to move it around. So it worked really well. And over time, we got different approaches to how these games could work. You've got things that are very fast and action heavy. Anyone who's played Kickoff knows it's extremely quick. I got a stopwatch out. You can run from one end of the field to the other in about 7 seconds, which you cannot do in real life if anyone has ever tried.
I mean, you get there, but then your heart explodes. That's fine.
You know, even Usain Bolt would not be able to make it from one end to the other in 7 seconds. The field is longer than that. But that game is such breakneck fast, and that's the excitement of it. And some games treat the ball as like its own object, and the fun part of the game is trying to make the ball do what you want it to do, because it's going to bounce off you in unpredictable ways. And then other games, which is more what became the dominant mode, they sort of stick the ball to your foot. In the old days, they used to call it Velcro foot. So like, because the ball is like you're running and it's stuck to you. Eventually, they got more sophisticated, and the ball would like keep bobbing in front, and then someone can maybe run across and they can nick it from you. But it would stick to you, and that then allows you to keep changing direction and weaving and going on fun runs. And you've got games that are extremely violent. They're probably the most famous one is Red Card, where you can do like flying kicks into someone's head, and the referee just is like, whatever. And there are arcade games like Hat-Trick Hero. The referee's fat and he can't keep up with the play, and so if the referee doesn't see it, it didn't happen. Right. If the referee sees you foul somebody, then there'll be a free kick. But if he doesn't see it, you can punch someone over. It doesn't matter. You just so it's a cool game about doing things behind the referee's back. So lots of creativity along the way, and you've got a game called This Is Football, or This Is Soccer, World Tour Soccer or something was the name in the US. There's a dive button. And it's the most dramatic dive. It's just so funny to watch, because the guy will throw his arms up in the air and he'll do like the stereotypical, "Oh, he touched me" dive.
Right.
Give me a penalty. He touched my sleeve. You do that and you try and fool the referee into giving you a free kick. So there's meta games in so many good soccer games. And I got to look at how things have evolved, and we called it a tale of two halves, because you have the 2D era and you have the 3D era, and the way that the games played was very different. And if you look at the history of it, things actually pretty much changed on a dime in the mid-90s. The way the games played, they were very accessible, I suppose you could say. In the beginning, they're like 1 or 2 buttons for the action games, and very basic for the management games. And then around 95, everything changed. So on the action side, you had games like Virtual Striker, fantastic arcade game, and VR soccer or actual soccer, depending on where you live in the world. These were 3D games, and suddenly it became more about making it play like what you see on TV. And trying to copy that. And similar things happened with other sports at about the same time. The technology finally got to the point where you could make it look and play like what you see on TV, and everything else sort of died out slowly. And so that second half is like the gradual extinction of every other modality of how a soccer game could play and how it could work. The big successful ones just sort of eat everyone else. Gets to the point where that's all that's left. You've got these 3 big guys and then some casual games that like on mobile, and occasionally an interesting indie comes along and does something different. That's it.
Well, as someone that has seen the entire history of both like the hyper realistic and then also these games that kind of take liberty with physics or with gameplay, what would you say personally is the most fun to play?
That is really hard to say.
It's just your personal preference.
Because fun can be different things. So for me, I find it very fun to make beautiful football, because I'm a fan of the sport. So I find it really fun and enjoyable and relaxing to make what I consider to be beautiful football, something that's like Barcelona or Arsenal at their peak. This beautiful, fast-moving, the ball's constantly in motion, passing between different players, and it's elegant and just really fluid. I like making that happen, and so I find that can work extremely well in the PlayStation 2 era Pro Evolution Soccer games, or World Soccer Winning 11. If you're in the US, you probably knew it as Winning 11. If you're in Japan, you definitely knew it as Winning 11. And so those games are great. And the best one, in my view, is the Korean version of Pro Evolution Soccer 5. It's called Winning 11-9 Liveware Evolution. That it's like patched and improved on the international version. It's really, really good. But then there's also other kinds of fun. And like I had just a blast playing Ultimate Soccer on the Mega Drive or the Genesis, where you can play with the physics, and you can turn off outs so that the ball will just bounce off the walls. You can really go nuts, and it's silly. You can get sort of moon physics, and it's a really fast game. And the goalkeepers are really good unless you make them stupid, in which case they're terrible. And so you can customize that. You can change the dribbling to be like the Velcro foot. It's really stuck close to you, or the super loose and someone's constantly stealing it off you, or anywhere in between. So it's got great customization. I found that game really, really fun. I had a blast playing that. So maybe I'll just say those two. Because I could go on about other fun games for ages.
Sure. No,
I love
absolutely.
this book.
Oh yeah, no, it's very pretty too. It's so folks will have to. I mean, it's up there on the shelf right behind you. It's got the scarf that says Captain.
Yeah, I got this is the special edition. We call it the Captain's edition. So like anyone who watches the sport, they'll see somebody on every team has got an armband on, and they're the captain. And so we thought, let's have a slipcase cover with a captain's armband around it for the special edition. It's just a fun bit of whimsy.
Absolutely. No, it's very pretty too. All of these books are gorgeous. So I did also want to talk to you about a little bit about the documentary series that you've produced. Some of the both the film and audio as a medium, specifically the life and times of video games, which was an audio series that you produced a few years back. You did 5 seasons, something like 40 episodes, a couple specials in there as well. Would you say that producing for audio is potentially more difficult than producing for other mediums, just because of the editing and everything that's required, like compared to maybe some more traditional media? And is it strange in 2025 to not call podcasts at this point traditional media?
And they're in that weird transition point, right, where they're becoming traditional media. They've certainly been embraced by traditional media for a long time now.
Yes.
But there's still experimentation that's able to happen a little bit on the side. So yeah, it's weird because podcasting has been part of why I'm not doing it anymore, why it's been on hiatus, and probably will continue to be for a long time, is that podcasting world is dominated by big companies now. And it's really hard. It was hard when I started, but it's become even harder to get any air for little indie projects. And I was never turning a profit on my show. I was always spending more time than I was bringing in money.
Right.
I do still believe that the vision that I had for what the show could become, which is pretty close to what I was doing in the final season, but not quite. I was thinking something a little bit broader than that, not exclusively history. I still think that could be a really good and popular, like, successful show, and I think the success of Chris Plant's post-game podcast shows that there's an audience that's really into well-produced podcast content about games that's in a more documentary style.
I was going to say, you have a lot of polish on this show, so I cannot imagine what the production pipeline looked like on getting this done as a semi regularly produced show. But it's still out there. People can go and listen right now at lifeandtimes.games, and I'll make sure to put a link to that out in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and so to the other parts of your question, it's different. Doing audio to other forms is different. Whether it's harder or not, it's it depends. It always depends on what it is. Audio. What's really hard with audio, and one of the things that's actually great about audio is that there's nowhere to hide because it's just what you hear, and our hearing is a very powerful sense. We can take in a lot when we're hearing, and it's also something where, because most of us can see, there are blind people, of course, but most of us can see, and so our eyes don't shut off. We're listening to something, our eyes are still taking in information. And compare that to like a film documentary, you are seeing and hearing at the same time. It's like encompassing. You're listening to an audio documentary, then you might have split focus. There's a good chance you're doing something. Maybe you're washing the dishes. Maybe you're watching your kids. You're driving to work. You're doing work. If you're crazy, I don't know how anyone can work and listen to a storytelling podcast, because I would just miss everything. But I hyperfocus, so maybe I'm special. Maybe most people can do the focus switching. I can't. I forget that the thing even exists once I get into my work. When you're listening, the sound becomes everything, and that's both good and bad. From a creative standpoint, it creates a great challenge, because you have to put a picture in someone's head. They have to see something by hearing it, and that means that the texture of the sound suddenly becomes important, and the sound design that you're doing, and how you're editing someone's voice. And it can even make a difference, like microphone placement. As you get closer, it becomes more intimate, and you get that depth, and it's like they're right in your ear talking to you. And sometimes you want to do that. You want to have that gentle feel. And other times you want to be back here, and you've got a bit more distance, and you're hanging out in the room. You're having a conversation. You're sitting on different couches, and you're just chatting. And you have to think about all of that when you're doing audio storytelling. How do you want people to feel? What vibe do you want this to have? There's this whole meta of it, besides the content, and you bring in music composition, you bring in sound effects, how you like, I got to the point where I'm like thinking about, how am I editing someone's voice? So I'm not just taking their voice from a microphone and like leveling it and putting it into the show. I'm processing it. I'm putting it through different filters, and I'm finessing the way they sound. And this is something I've gotten way better at doing film documentaries, because I do the sound for the stuff that we're working on. But I learned the basics of it doing the Life and Times video games. You can make someone sound quite radically different with different settings. You can bring out the body in their voice, or you can maybe someone's got quite a deep and booming voice. You can soften that a bit, because it can feel like it's overwhelming the whole sound of the show, and you can tweak that stuff. You can, someone who sounds quite dull, you can try to add a sparkle to them. You can try and make them sound livelier. You don't want to just like give them a new voice, because it's the most honest medium you can have. You can't, like I said, you can't hide in audio. It's right there. What you hear is all there is. So there's a lot of nuance and complexity to it, and when you're doing remote production, it's also just really, really hard to get good quality audio. I'm asking people all around the world to do an interview with me, and tell them, do you have a microphone that you can use, a decent microphone? You do? Okay. Do you know how to use it? If you set it up correctly, can you make sure that nobody is in the room with you? Or if they don't have a microphone, would you mind just recording on your phone? And then like they put their phone on the table and they're typing on a clicky keyboard, and all I hear is that on the recording. And so giving people direction on how to do the recording is then really, really hard. And so I had episodes where I'm like, this audio is terrible. What can I do to fix it? and that that was awful having to deal with that, and that's the problem of being a no budget indie. I couldn't do it. So audio is really, really hard, but it's also super fulfilling because I was everything in that show. I did the entire thing all by myself.
I was going to say producer, host, you were the PA, you did craft service, you did absolutely everything on it. And it's really, really great. I've listened to an episode or two. I'm going to try to get caught up. I did go through, I cherry picked some stuff that was kind of more interesting to me, but I fully intend to go through and listen to the rest of it. So, but it's again, it's like everything you do. It's very exhaustive in terms of like the research and the people that you talk to and or the interview and things. So it's well worth the time. So I'm going to make the investment. So thank you for kind of doing this kind of thing. Because again, I say all the time that we're at the point we really need to, like, every last copy of Snow Brothers for the Nintendo has been, in the box, has been graded and sealed in lucite and put, at the base of, some mountain so that no one will ever scratch it or touch it or breathe on it. But we're at the point we've got to get the stories where so that, because once these stories are gone, then that's kind of it. We lose a lot of the flavor and the nuance of what all this stuff meant when it came out. Because I mean, a game is a game, or a movie is a movie, but how did it make you feel? And what was that experience like? And how did that exist? Like you said earlier, kind of contemporaneous to when it was released. So, and I think that the show very much captures a lot of that.
Okay, I'm so pleased to hear you say that. That was what I was trying to do. And I wanted to.
Good.
I didn't want to just give you the stories in that show. That the whole point of the style there was that I'm giving the context. It's in the title, "The Life and Times of Video Games." The idea behind it was that this is about the lives that the games have and the stories behind how they were made. It's looking at where games have come from and where they're going and how they feel to play, and exploring all of that through highly polished interviews and my own reflections, I guess. I made myself a central character in that.
Yes. It's nice because it's less like sterile sort of analysis, and it's how it feels, and I think that's what makes it very enjoyable to listen to.
Good, thank you. Yeah, it was inspired, that style of all things was inspired by Grand Designs. If you've ever seen that show, great show about architecture, basically. So this guy Kevin MacLeod, who has a background in like theater and drama productions. So he's got a good sense of he's got like a flair to the way he thinks of things, and he for 20 plus years has been host of this show called Grand Designs, where every episode is about a different person or couple who are building their dream home. And they've probably employed an architect to come up with some crazy design, and then the thing follows through the whole building process. So at the beginning, they've bought their plot of land, they've got a design, and then we watch it get built. We watch everything go wrong, and he will pay site visits occasionally during the course of making this whole house come to exist, and he'll comment on it along the way, and he doesn't hold back. He says what he thinks, and he adds some color commentary about how he thinks it feels, and sort of giving you stuff to think about. I just really like the way that he engages with the projects. And I always wanted to do something like that with video games, but I didn't have the budget or the connections to basically do a video game version of Grand Designs. So I just used it as inspiration in designing my own show where I'm putting my own thoughts and reflections in as I'm doing it. It's sort of like it's a combination of essay and documentary.
Speaking of sort of exhaustive analysis of the creation of an industry, even let's take a few minutes. Let's talk about some of your film documentaries, like specifically the ones that, to talk about FPS, the first person shooter documentary that you did. It's only 4.5 hours long. I mean, clearly you didn't cover everything. I mean, come on. And then Terabytes, the evolution of horror gaming. But let's talk about FPS first. What kind of inspired you to launch into this sort of exhaustive documentary, kind of all about the rise of first-person shooters?
So that one, that was just happenstance that brought me to that. I was, as it happens, sort of plotting a all or nothing for the future of the life and times of video games. I was like, I'm going to do a crowdfunding campaign about where I'm going to do a single themed season about one topic, and it's going to be high production, and this is my last shot at trying to turn it into a job, because I don't want to keep freelancing full time. It's exhausting and debilitating doing full-time freelance. I can't. But the books aren't, at least not yet, earning me enough money to do that. So I need a day job, and I thought maybe if I go big, I can turn this podcast into my job, or at least close to it. And I'm sort of planning that. I'm exploring the space. I've started. I've had a couple of conversations. I'm sort of honing in on a vision, and then I get an email out of the blue from this guy, Robin Block. And Robin Block is the CEO and founder of Creative VC, this company behind some documentaries, crowdfunded documentaries. They're most famous for In Search of Darkness, which is about 1980s horror. The first one is like 3.5 hours. They were just finishing part 2, I think, when he contacted me, and that's even longer. They're in the 90s now on like the 5th film, and it's like 6 hours long. It's just enormous. So that they go really deep into horror films. And he said to me that they are working on a new gaming documentary about first-person shooters, and he wanted to talk to me. That's basically all he told me. And so I said, sure, I'll hop on a call with you. And I had imagined that maybe he's screening me and he wants me to be interviewed in the documentary.
Yeah.
But it turns out, after talking to him for a few minutes, he wanted me to write it. So we're chatting. He's talking about my history, telling me a bit about the documentary, and then he pitches me on writing it. And I, oh, okay. And I went away and I did some research on his company, learned about the films that they'd made, and thought, okay, yeah, I'll put one foot in this, and I'll write you a new synopsis, because they had an existing synopsis, and he said it wasn't good enough. It wasn't going to work. So I rewrote the synopsis, and I basically, taking the template of In Search of Darkness, I went, okay, if we did a complete look at the genre, what would it look like? What are the games that we would cover? So I wrote this huge document that had like 100 games in it or something. It never would have been possible to make it as one film, but I didn't know this. I'd never made a film before. I did what I was briefed to do, which was to do a treatment for a whole genre documentary. I didn't have a single decade. I had to do the whole thing from the beginning to recent-ish day. And so I put that together. He said, this is great. I sat in on some meetings. I decided, okay, yeah, I'll do it. I signed on, but I was still a bit hesitant because I'd never thought of myself as a first-person shooter guy. I know the genre. the reason he contacted me is I had written an Ars Technica article about 7,000 words, I think, something like that, 7 or 8,000 words about the history of first-person shooters, and it's one of my better history articles, like general history articles that isn't based on interviews. Really nicely put together, and he loved it. He thought, this guy, he gets it. He can do a documentary on this. And he'd only chosen first-person shooters because he likes Halo. He's not a gamer, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He's a huge fan of Halo, and he thought, first-person shooters, they're popular. Let's do a documentary on that. He has since moved much more scientific with processes. So I'm working at the moment on a new proposal that we're going to have to validate quite carefully to prove that there's a market, because FPS and terabytes, neither of them earned enough money to, like, they didn't lose money, but they didn't earn enough to be like considered home runs.
Yeah.
Because they cost so much to make, even though they're very successful compared to other documentaries. Like, they're up there, maybe top 5 most successful gaming documentaries, but because they cost a lot to make, we need to do better next time. We need to be smarter and do better. So I've been working on that, but that's a separate thing. So FPS, I decided, okay, I'll do it, but I'm still a bit unsure. And I thought, I want to bring in some backup here. And I said, we should talk to my friend David Craddock. He's a proper expert on first-person shooters. And he's a massive Doom fan, and he'd just done a book called Rocket Jump about the 90s golden age of first-person shooters. And so David comes in, and he sort of joins as an advisor, quickly becomes a producer on the project, because he's just turning up to meetings. And the way he tells it is, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to come. No, he's invited, and so he turns up. And because he kept showing up, he became a producer officially. And then after we did our first crowdfunding campaign, it was decided that he would become the director or co-director with our editor, Chris Stratton. And so the two of them, neither of them have directed a feature-length thing before. Neither of them have written or like worked on any feature-length thing before. I've not done any feature-length work before, so we're a very new and inexperienced team. That they were co-directing, I was co-writing with David and producing, and we made a shitload of mistakes. We didn't know what we were doing. We had an interview wish list that I had thought, okay, we're going to like go through this and whittle it down, but instead, what happened was that David and our PR people, who have like this huge Rolodex of contacts, they went through and they just started contacting people. And I picked out some of my own personal contacts as well. And we ended up with like 8 id Software people in a cast of 50. And like, this isn't going to work. And we dropped a few of them, but we still ended up with several id Software people in the end.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so it was a bit imbalanced. And there were problems in production, like we were making the film too long. Oops, we were on track to be like 5.5, 6 hours when we had a hard limit because it's what could fit on a single layer Blu-ray of 4.5 hours. It had to be maximum 4.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to then, we're like 2/3 of the way through post-production. We had to cut heaps of content, throw out work that was already pretty polished. It's a bit of an uneven film in the end. It's good, but it could have been a lot better. And we learned so much from it. And then we came out of that, and no doubt you want to hear me talk about terabytes next.
Absolutely. I was a monster kid growing up, and I loved that era of gaming. So yes, I would love to hear it.
So we're sort of at the end of the project. We're doing our final campaign. We call it like a last chance pre-sale. It's the last chance to get your name in the credits before we lock it off, because these productions, they're all crowdfunded, and it's all about doing it for the fans, and it's by fans. So it's like it's community focused. And so we're doing that last chance campaign. We're finishing that up, and we're doing sort of preparing to get it printed and fulfilled out to backers. And in the midst of all that, this guy that Robin knows, Daniel Richardson, and they'd worked together a little bit on something else. He proposed a documentary to Robin. He said, "How about you do In Search of Darkness, but for video games?" And Robin was like, "Are there horror games?" It's not a game.
Yeah.
And Dan's like, yeah, there are horror games. And he wrote a treatment, and there was some back and forth, and I was pulled in because Robin wanted me to move on to a new project. The plan was for David to do something else that hopefully will happen one day. I probably shouldn't talk about it, but we had a specific project in mind for David that is still on the shelf at the moment, and then we needed something for me, and I was sort of toying with some ideas, but this came in, and I gave feedback back and forth a bit, and pretty quickly we came to the idea that it should be episodic. And out of about a dozen different episode ideas, we landed on the 5 that we have in the end, which are survival horror, like licensed games and adaptations of other media, FMV games, so games that are trying to be movies, the rise of the modern indie scene, and what we called Cursed and Controversial, which is about horror-themed games getting caught up in controversy, usually to their detriment. Some like Rule of Rose got banned because of some stupid controversy. It was made up by Italian media.
Or like Chiller and things like that.
And stuff that is in the cursed vein. It's like fake games, things like that. Like it just popped out of my head. The famous arcade game that never was.
Oh, Polybius.
Polybius. That's it, Polybius, and some other things in the sort of fake games arena, because nowadays we've got creepypastas and people making games that are styled after creepypastas. So that episode digs into all of that while wrapping up everything, all the themes from the previous 4 episodes. And that was a huge production. We ended up with 6 hours of content plus credits, 6 hours runtime, and then 20 minutes of credits for each episode. So if you're someone who watches the credits through to the end, you've got what's that? 6 hours plus another hour 40 on top of that. 7 hours 40 minutes.
And then after all of that, Sam Jackson comes out and tries to get you guys to join the Avengers Initiative. It just keeps going. Oh,
no, there's no post-credits scene. Don't worry. If people are worried about that, we didn't put in a post-credits. But yeah, that was a huge endeavor, and we had a smaller budget than FPS actually. So we did more content on a tighter budget with a smaller team, because there were just 3 core people plus a couple of extras helping with stuff. And I was never a huge horror guy growing up. So I've always dabbled in horror. Like I've never finished a Silent Hill game or a Resident Evil game, but I've played some of them. And I remember like PlayStation 1 demo discs. I loved playing horror games on there. And there's things like Alone in the Dark. It's one of the few horror games that I've actually played or played most of the way through. So I dabble in the genre, and I like my adventure horror games and like FMV horror games. But I, just like with FPS, I was never a horror guy. And I was really unsure at first when I was asked to be on the project. I'm like, really? Horror games? I think there's a really interesting story here, but am I the guy for this? But Robin was like, don't worry about it. You'll pick up what you don't know, and of course I did what I do, and I did a deep dive, and I plugged all the gaps in my knowledge, and by the end I was a proper expert, and I was lucky to have Dan, who is the most knowledgeable person I've ever met about horror games. He just knows so much, I could always lean on him and always say, hey, what about this game? Or just ping him with ideas about things we could explore. And so we were a really good creative team together. And I'm quite proud of what we ended up doing. We had another documentary with almost 50 interviews. No, just over. We had 51 interviews in the end, because we put in a few extras at the last minute who were sort of freebies, and we got them because we needed to plug gaps in the documentary. We'd actually made most of the documentary, and we're like, we need someone. We've got a segment where it's one person talking, and we want someone else in there so we can go back and forth between them. So we've talked to an expert on that game, and we had some backer feedback. Like, we'd shown a preview version of episode 2 to our backers, and we had feedback that it wasn't really tying together super well, the different segments. There was not as good a through line as we wanted. So a friend of Dan's happens to be a PhD candidate who's doing research in horror games, and she's a really good speaker. So we got her to come in, and we sort of fed her some lines and asked her some questions, and edited that in to make the episode flow better, and peppered her throughout the documentary series to make it natural. And she's so good. She's one of the actually best interviews we had. It's a shame we didn't talk to her earlier. We could have had a lot more of her in there.
That's still great. I know the very first episode of it is available on YouTube. You can kind of watch it there, and then if you are interested, you can go out to the production site, and you can actually purchase episodes through there. So
correct, yes. So episode 1, Enter the Survival Horror, is free on YouTube. It's our feature-length episode. It's 90 minutes long plus credits, and it tells the story of sort of the rise and fall and revival of survival horror, going back, of all things, to Sinister, the arcade game. So
yes, I hunger.
We reasoned that he is like the original stalker enemy, Sinister, chasing after you, and stalkers became a huge thing in Resident Evil in the late 90s. And so we have this whole we go through the history right up until like Resident Evil 4, when survival horror died, and then sort of have this couple of segments at the end of the afterlife of survival horror, and how, well, it didn't completely die, and actually now it's sort of back. And that's what that episode is. My favorite episode, you can probably gather, is the FMV one, though, because I'm more of an adventure game guy.
Sure. I'm an adventure game guy as well. It doesn't have to be a very sophisticated game to be scary. Like, I will absolutely be somebody to tell you that I could only play Haunted House on the 2600 if the lights were on. As a kid, I just remember playing that. It was just kind of, it's the fear of the unknown, which I think is kind of at the root of a lot of what makes things scary in horror titles. That it's what's around the next corner, it's the dark basement, all of those type of things. So I as a monster kid, I would watch a lot of these things. I'd watch a lot of kind of the resurgence of, you could just make scary things for television, and you could even aim it at kids, and it was okay at that time. So like Tales from the Dark Side, and there was a Canadian shows called Monsters, which was just sort of like kind of a sister series for, it was John Romero from the Night of the Living Dead fame that had kind of produced both of those series. But it's I don't know, it's, if you look about the resurgence of survival horror and things like that, it seems like a lot of it is rooted in trying to recreate some of those old experiences. If you look what Capcom has done for like the last 10 years with re-releasing next gen versions of all the Resident Evil games, and with PT and things like that like all of these things trying to tap into to that world. I even heard that there was like like a remakes or like a proposed remake for the Clock Tower series, and it's nuts that people are kind of rediscovering all of that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff. So, like, what is different about horror is that it's about horror in games. It's not about being powerful. In other genres, it's sort of power trips.
Mhm.
You're all about, I am this badass guy, and
Yes.
I've got machine guns. I can stomp on people's heads, or I'm like Lara Croft can do backflips and stuff. But in horror, you take the power away. And what's really cool actually with Tomb Raider is that you've got this like superhero lady. She can do the most incredible stuff. But then you get all these moments where suddenly she actually feels incredibly vulnerable. So Tomb Raider dips in and out of horror.
Yeah.
It's like power fantasy, and then suddenly, oh shit, it's horror, and it becomes really scary. And it effortlessly goes back and forth between the two, particularly in the early days in like Tomb Raider 1 and 2, that they are scary games a lot of the time. And if you look at what's happening now in the modern indie horror scene, that most of them are very simple games that they figured out that it's just the idea that's the core, and where and making you afraid of the unknown. Like, David Szymanski made Iron Lung. You're spending the whole game in this little tiny submersible, and you can't move around. You can't. It's completely unknown because you can't see outside. You don't have windows. All you can do is take photos of the world outside. That's how you interact with the outside. You just take pictures of it. It's a very scary game. It's about the atmosphere. It's about that vibe. Erdorf's Faith series, the Unholy Trinity, they look like a Commodore 64 game or something. It's very primitive graphics, but you ask anyone who's played them, they're scary games.
Oh yeah,
and you've got most of the 3D stuff is intentionally looking like PlayStation era. And that's partly because of like nostalgia cycles and the trend being early 3D era being really nostalgic right now. But it's also that era was very, very effective for horror because it was full of chunky pixels. You could see enough to get the gist of what's going on, but you couldn't see so much that you could fully give form to the monster that's hiding in the corner there. And you got lots of fog. Like the draw distance was terrible back then. So that you had that unknown all pervading through everything, and it was very scary. And the clunky movement. And so the modern indies, they've figured out that's sort of the sweet spot for scary games is 90s tech. And so we're just going to keep getting scary games that's using that kind of vibe.
Sure. Again, you don't need sophisticated technology. You need a good story. You need something that taps into kind of that primal fear that we all have and exploit that. So you said you're an adventure gaming person. I'm an adventure gaming person. I would say The Excavation of Hobbs Barrow is one of the best games that I've played maybe in the last 10 years. That's a Lovecraft. It doesn't bill itself as Lovecraftian horror, but it absolutely is at its underpinnings. And just you get to a point in the game where you're just like, okay, we have turned a corner on this story. It is no longer just friendly. It is now the world is very adversarial that your character is part of, and you have to kind of navigate that and figure out her place in the larger expanded universe. Now it's a lot of the characters and stuff in those Lovecraft stories. It's like the kind of the wool is taken off of their eyes and they can finally kind of see the world for what it finally is. And it's one of those stories and you just kind of get pulled into this thing. So, and the graphics for that look like something that would have been released for the SCI engine by Sierra, something like an adventure game in the 90s, but it hits you like, in all of your little fear zone. And so you have to keep playing. You want to see where the story goes, even if it is kind of mildly terrifying the entire time. But Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to. I've got it in my YouTube queue. I'm going to watch it, and then I'll have to get the rest of the documentary series as well. I'm sold. I'm sold. But we're coming up on 2 hours. Richard, I wanted to thank you so much for taking time and having a conversation, talking about your amazing career. I cannot wait to see what is next. I know you kind of teased a little bit of it earlier. I'm sure that there will be an announcement the second that you can talk about those things. But kind of in the meantime, I want to make sure to recommend again to everybody at home that you pick up a copy of The Secret History of Macintosh Gaming. Make sure you can still get the expanded edition, which has something like, several additional chapters. You said like 6,000 additional words. There's a lot of great interviews in here. There's a lot of great stories and beautiful, beautiful pictures. I know that you can purchase kind of a digital version of this, but I think you are missing out because there are so many great just plates and beautiful photographs in here that is really what sells a lot of the story. Like there's some stuff I just turned right to the Journeyman Project page. And again, like so many things in here that were like those formative experiences for Macintosh gamers back in the day. And of course, Cosmic Osmo. But
Love that.
yes, love it. So definitely pick up a copy of this. Richard Moss, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.